Hey friends, welcome to episode 6 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits podcast. Today I'm super excited to let you guys listen in on a conversation between myself and Naomi Green. Naomi Green is a certified vegan lifestyle coach and educator who is also certified in plant-based nutrition from the E. Cornell T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutritional Studies and is a board member of the nationwide plant-based nutrition movement, Tampa Bay chapter, at pbnm.org. Naomi specializes in helping people go whole food vegan for serious weight loss and serious health gains. She has been coaching private clients and running an insanely successful 10-week online whole food plant-based no oil group weight loss program and a free online Going Vegan for Health Facebook support group, as well as many fun and interactive online classes for those going vegan for health. Naomi also presents cooking workshops and demos, cooking parties, and corporate wellness program events around the Tampa Bay area since recovering from breast cancer treatment in 2014, and she credits going vegan with much of her health, healing, and happiness. It was a pleasure chatting with her, and I know you guys will get a lot of value out of this episode. So without further ado, let's start the show. All right. Hey, friends, this is Trent Lindsey. Thank you for joining us with episode 6 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits podcast. Today, I have Naomi Green on the line. Naomi, thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's nice to meet you, and it was wonderful to hear your story.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and jump into the podcast. If you don't mind, just to get our listeners a little bit more comfortable with your story, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, I am a certified vegan lifestyle coach and educator now, and that simply means that I help people adopt a whole food plant-based diet so that they can experience serious weight loss and serious health gains. And so that's what I do now, but that's not how it always was for me. Like most people, I have a long story, and I didn't start out that way, just like you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's dive deeper into that a little bit. So, how long have you been a vegan coach?
So I've been coaching for about 4 years, and I've been vegan for about 5.5 years, completely whole food plant-based. Because there is a difference.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we can definitely touch on that a little bit more when you start talking about, kind of the foods that you eat and things like that. But before you decided to go whole food plant-based, did you eat a relatively healthy diet, or what was that like?
It's interesting because I thought that I was eating a healthy diet, and I shopped at Whole Foods and I bought organic chickens, and I knew about superfoods like kale and acai berries, and I ate a lot of fruit, and I thought that my meat and cheese centered diet was a healthy diet. I just had never heard any different, and I didn't know any different. And so that is what I ate before I went vegan, just like everybody else. I went out to dinner. I didn't think anything of it. I ate, chicken with broccoli at a restaurant or pizza once a week, all of that kind of thing. So, just like everybody else, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I was pretty much the exact same way. So I was raised on chicken pretty much. We didn't have that much beef. Yeah. My dad's side of the family has been in like the chicken industry for generations. So we've had a lot of chicken in our life, and that was, the healthy meat, right? Like that was the good stuff.
The white. Yeah. My parents were pretty health conscious. And in fact, my dad, way back in the 70s, he followed the Pritikin diet, and he was very health conscious, and he jogged way before it was cool to be a runner. And so, my mother used to serve us like cantaloupe melon before dinner. Like she would have like a wedge of that on our plates. And, she was very conscious of vegetables, but and she cooked at home a lot, and we had home cooked meals and dinners together, but it was meat centered, even though, you know what I mean? So I really was brought up that way. And, that's just how I was brought up. And I think most of us are brought up, at least eating with meals centered around meat and cheese that way. It's just how it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what, we're even told to do, right? By something like the dietary guidelines, in our country, right? Like that's kind of right. what we're told we should have on our plate.
Exactly.
And that's part of the, I think, difficulty that some people experience when they decide to go plant-based is, how do I go down this path that might be different than what we see on commercials and from all the so-called experts out there.
Yeah, even what you hear from your doctor, these doctors, your doctor, most people's doctors are not trained in nutrition or in the prevention or reversal of chronic diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. And they don't really understand how nutrition can benefit those diseases and actually reverse them. They just don't have the information, nor have they looked for it, nor have they received it. So they don't know. So they won't tell you that you can do that. They won't even give you the choice. They will say, here is a statin. That is it for your high cholesterol.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you have diabetes, then you're supposed to avoid the carbs and
exactly. So if your doctor doesn't say it and the school system doesn't say it and the government doesn't say it, then it's hard to make that your belief system until you delve deeper and learn it for yourself and are able to change your belief system from the status quo.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had perceived your diet as healthy, right? So
yeah,
at some point you decided that it wasn't healthy anymore. I mean, what kind of what sparked that?
So in 2014, I felt a lump in my breast, and because I led a healthy lifestyle, and also in addition to thinking I ate healthy, I also ran with my dogs. My kids were athletes. We were an active family. I thought I was living a healthy life. So when I felt that lump in my breast, I thought, it must be like a fibroid cyst. Women can get that. And actually I had one when I was 20. So, and this was when I was 47. So 5 years ago, 5.5. So I went and I got the mammogram, and, they told me that, it looked like breast cancer. They were going to have to do the biopsies and all of that. And then when the doctor called me for the biopsy, I was driving in the car with my kids in the back. They were teenagers. There was like loud rap music on. And she said to me, "You have invasive ductal carcinoma stage 2. And I couldn't hear her because of the loud rap music. And I was like, what are you saying? She goes, "You have invasive ductal carcinoma stage 2. And I said, "I don't know what those words are. What are you saying?" And she like yelled, because I guess she could hear the music. She was like, "You have breast cancer, stage 2. You need to come in." And I said, No. I don't have breast cancer. That's ridiculous. And she was like, "You need to come in." So I went in there, and it actually turned out not to be funny at all. And, I went to see the oncologist, and she said I needed to remove my breasts, and then after the removal of that, they found, that the cancer was in the lymph nodes, and that I would need, that 9 months of chemotherapy and 35 radiation treatments. And I did everything that they said. And at the end of that, do you know anybody who has cancer?
I have known somebody with cancer, but not breast cancer.
All right. Well, for all cancers, they do this really dumb thing at the end of it, which I really think is so dumb. When you on your last chemotherapy session, they ring this bell in the chemo room, and they go, "Yay, you're cancer free." And you're like, "Yay," right? So you go in to see the oncologist, and she says, "Oh, by the way, here's this pill I want you to take for the next 10 years. For breast cancer survivors, that is an aromatase inhibitor, for tamoxifen, and 3 other ones for postmenopausal women that inhibit estrogen, because estrogen causes tumor development in women who are susceptible, which is most women and my kind of cancer. So she said, you need to take this pill for the next 10 years. And I was like, and she said, and we'll have you come in and we'll test you, every 3 months, and we'll tell you when the cancer comes back. And I was like, what are you talking about? The cancer comes back. And she was like, well, it was in your lymph nodes. We can't be sure that we got, they can't, when they remove your breasts, cancer cells drop all over the chest wall. They don't know that they get it. We do the best we can to kill all the cancer cells with the chemo and the radiation. And right now you've had a PET scan and you're cancer free. And so I was devastated by that. She just, scared me to death. So I went home and I was so sad, and I was just really, really devastated. And I took the pills and I started to read about them, and I found out that not only do they cause cancer, but they have horrible side effects, which I found out firsthand. They make you feel like a little old lady, it hurts, like your bones hurt. And I thought, God, how am I going to keep doing this? So then I remembered about the kale and the acai berries, and I started to think, maybe there's something with the food. Like maybe I could find out which foods cause cancer and which foods, keep cancer away. And, I said to myself, I'm going to ask my oncologist that next time I go. Right. So I went in there on my 3-month visit, and I told her I didn't want to take these pills. And I said, can you tell me what to eat that doesn't cause cancer, or what I could eat that kills cancer cells? Isn't there superfoods like that? And she looked at me and she said, it doesn't matter what you eat. She said, I want you to take these pills. And I said, come on, I know there's superfoods. Why don't you tell me what to eat? And she said, it doesn't matter what you eat. I want you to take these pills. And so I left that oncologist appointment pretty mad. Like I was really mad, like on top of being bald, scared, scarred. Now I was mad. So I started Google searching, consulting Dr. Google, right?
Of course.
So like we do. And I was Googling food and cancer and nutrition. And I came across the documentary Forks Over Knives. Have you seen that?
Absolutely, I have.
Yeah. So there I was, bald, scared, scarred, watching that documentary. And all of a sudden, Dr. T. Colin Campbell is describing his 35-year research on animal proteins. And he says, just like this, we found that eating animal protein turns cancer cells on, and not eating animal proteins turns cancer cells off. And I thought, oh my God, that's something I can do. And then, he goes on to describe how they could turn on and turn off the cancer cells by raising and lowering the amount of proteins every 21 days. And then, the rest of the documentary goes on to say all the different research on how these same animal proteins and animal foods with their cholesterol and saturated fat are also responsible for the epidemics of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease that we have in this country today. And I thought, oh my gosh, how could I not have known this? And I ran to my refrigerator and I just threw everything away right then and there. And I went on Amazon and I ordered the Forks Over Knives cookbook, and I just started cooking out of that cookbook. And that's what happened. That's how it went down.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I remember when I decided to go plant-based too, I reached for cookbooks also. Like that was kind of my way of having a guidelines, I guess, on what,
well, even
what is a complete meal,
Yeah. So even 5 years ago, there wasn't that many of these cookbooks. There was maybe 3 or something. So, that Forks Over Knives cookbook, that really showed me what to do quickly, because everything in there is cooked without oil and without animal food. So you don't have to jigger around the recipes to remove the oil, and you don't have to keep seeing cream, eggs, cheese, meat in your recipes and leave it out. You just change your mindset and you don't see it anymore. And I think that's a very big tip that I could give to people, is to start out with one whole food, plant-based, no oil cookbook, and just simply start there without buying 5 of them and getting all overwhelmed and all of that. Or trying to, search on Pinterest for vegan recipes and remove all the oil and things yourself. It's just much easier to choose a cookbook that is designed that way. And you get the health benefits a lot quicker.
Yeah. So, there's obviously different ways to go plant-based too. Do you recommend with your clients to go 100% day one?
Yeah. I recommend to my clients to go 100% day one. I am not a baby steps person, so I attract people who want to do it overnight. But not only that, so I deal with really sick and obese people, and they're desperate to overcome this once and for all. They have watched the documentaries. They know they have installed a new belief system. They know what they want to do. And, if you are sick and obese and you have an A1C level that is 9 and you have cholesterol in the 300s and your blood pressure is out of control and, you're obese and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, then the quickest way to lower that blood pressure, get your cholesterol down, start to regulate blood sugar and shed some of that weight quickly is to do it overnight. And this way, the transition detox effect is quicker. You lose the weight quicker. You feel better quicker. That's my main message. You feel better quicker.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, if you make the changes all at once, it's very clear in your mind to see how the changes in your diet can benefit your health. Where, if you do take that slower transition where, maybe you replace your breakfasts first and then your lunches and then a couple of dinners each week. And, it takes, say 3 or 4 months to transition. I think you just don't feel it the same way.
And for people suffering with high blood pressure, you can affect that blood pressure in just a couple of days, couple of days to 2 weeks. Your blood pressure starts to come down. Your meds start to be too much and you find yourself having to call your doctor and say, hey, I think my meds are too much. And they'll ask you, what are you doing? They'll ask you for your numbers and then they'll reduce your medication. And when that happens, you see the power and then you know that it's the right thing. Something
absolutely.
That powerful.
And I have a blood pressure monitor at home just to kind of keep track. And, every once in a while, my diet kind of changes. It fluctuates. I don't necessarily eat the same things every month. Just depends on what's going on in life sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it's always kind of nice to have that just in case if, for some reason I'm incorporating too much, salt or oil or something that's not, the best for my diet.
Did you have high blood pressure before?
I never really had too high of blood pressure. I think, 130 over 90 or something like that. It was never really bad. But it does run in my family. So it's just something that I've always stayed on top of.
They have reduced the high blood pressure threshold to 130 over 80. Did you know that? That happened last year.
Is it 130 over 80 or 120 over 80?
Yeah. No, they reduced it from 140 over 90 to 130 over 80. Yeah. So usually what happens is that once you really adopt a whole food, plant-based, no oil way of eating, and you really don't eat oil very much, these blood pressure and cholesterol, glucose issues, obesity, it's a thing of the past. That's the way you used to be. It's not the way you are anymore. I myself lost about 40 pounds. I didn't even know that I was that heavy, but that is a risk factor for breast cancer development and also for recurrence, the recurrence risk. So losing the weight is actually very important.
It's funny that you say that because I didn't really think I was, overweight or anything like that when I decided to go plant-based either, but yet I dropped like 25 pounds.
Yeah. My husband too, he dropped 22.
and it kind of just happened. Like I didn't change my exercise routine.
Yep.
Which is very minimal. And because I have young kids. I run around them and chase them around. That's my exercise most of the time. But, so I didn't even necessarily try that hard. But I think in some situations it's just as easy to gain weight too, as long as you're, if you're not eating the right type of plant-based diet.
Yeah. For most people who are on the weight loss journey aspect of it, one of the beautiful things about this way of eating is that it does not depend on exercise or calorie counting or carb counting or, meal portion control. And for people who are sick and obese, like you have to think about somebody who has type 2 diabetes and they have neuropathy in their feet. They cannot exercise. They are so fat, they can't exercise. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So the fact that they can just change what's on their plate and start eating this way, and it can start working on the inside before they're able to walk, they will soon find that they are then soon able to walk and able to move on with their lives and able to be more active. And they get a whole new lease on life, so to speak, just from making this one little change. And that is really the beauty of it. Because in the old paradigm, you had to, exercise and diet. And people would say, well, I can't exercise, this doesn't depend on that.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what's on the plate. So I know you're a fan of the forks over knives, like whole food, plant-based, oil or no oil. But can you give us some actual examples? Like what would you have for, breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Yeah. So this is how I teach people very simply what's on the plant-based plate. And it's very simply fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. That's it. So what are some examples of that? People might be like fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. So what are some examples? Like rice and beans. Most people love rice and beans, and especially diabetics have been told, oh, you can't eat rice or beans. They're too high in starch, right? But really, once you remove the animal products, right, if you're not eating it with cheese and meat and additionally the oil, then all of a sudden it's very low fat, high in fiber, high in antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, all of that. And the starch is regulated by the fiber, so you don't have those blood sugar spikes, right? So rice and beans is one example. Another example is like a beautiful Italian minestrone soup, which is just a vegetable and bean soup, right? Most people are like, oh yeah, I love that when I go to Olive Garden.
Exactly.
Or when I go to Carrabba's. They both have, a vegan minestrone. So that's some examples. Another example of like breakfast is oatmeal with fruit in it of any kind that you like. So those are just some really quick examples. Another thing is I like to teach people is replace the cream cheese that you would have on a bagel with hummus. Even better if you can make it at home yourself without the oil. So it's creamy, it's tasty, it's savory, and it's animal free. And if you make it yourself, it's very low in fat. So and high in fiber and high in starches from the beans and protein. That's where we get our protein from. So those are just a few examples, and lots of fruit. So diabetics, again, they go to the doctor and they're told, don't eat fruit, high in sugar. But fruit is perfect because, again, it comes along with the fiber that's in the fruit so that blood sugar is regulated as you eat it and it goes into the bloodstream. It's regulated by that fiber. So I usually teach people to up their fruit intake to several a day. And that's also another way that people can kick their sugar addiction. Every time they want sweets, go ahead and eat the sweetest fruit that you love. Most people love watermelon and pineapple and honeydew melon and cuties, those little mandarin oranges. They're so sweet, but they cure a sugar addiction because it's the natural kind of sweet that your body and taste buds are made for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And the only question I have, I guess, to expand on that a little bit is, do you talk with your clients at all about, raw food versus cooked food? and if there's any benefits to either approach?
So I try to not be extreme with clients, because the biggest hurdle is to remove the animal products. That's the most important thing. So if people start going off on a tangent on raw versus cooked, or doesn't it all need to be organic, or, all of those kinds of tangents, none of that is the most important thing. The most important thing is eating only plant foods and sticking to fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. That's the most important thing. And if then you're doing that and you're experiencing the health benefits and it's working for you properly, then if you have lots of money to spend on organics, you can buy organics. If you don't have a big budget for it, you can decide which 5 or 10 things do I want to concentrate on buying organic. Or if you want to increase your amount of raw food per day, then you can do that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I agree. I know a lot of people really like the heavy starches, and do perfectly, fine on that, like the rice and beans and potatoes. And
they do fine. Their blood sugar reduces. Yeah, they lose their cholesterol, but more importantly, they love the food. So then this changes that whole dieting mindset where you hate it and you can't eat enough and you feel deprived. Instead, You're eating beautiful meals that your body knows how to use and uses up completely. So, and remember, I work mostly with people at the transitioning stage. So that's why, I'm very focused on just leaving out leaving out the animal foods and focusing on plant foods and sticking to fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. So, you might notice that I'm leaving out the whole nuts and seeds factor, right?
Yeah, I did notice, but I think, and for people who are trying to lose weight, and this kind of goes along with like the forks over knives, no oils. You kind of leave out the fats as well. You haven't mentioned avocados, but I would imagine, you may leave those out also.
So when it comes to, nuts and high fat plant foods, so lots of people make the mistake when they first go vegan on their own without any help, that all plant foods are fair game, and they will load up on, avocados and start using coconut milk in everything. And they'll start eating peanut butter by the spoonfuls and smeared on bread all day long. And also they'll start cooking with a lot more oil, that kind of thing. And they may find that they gain weight and their cholesterol goes up, and they say, hey, I adopted a whole food plant-based diet and it didn't work for me. And that's because they ate too much of that high fat plant foods. So what I like to teach my clients is to save the avocado for when it will make the dish so delicious. So an example of that is, let's say you're having a rice and bean burrito. You can put a few slices of avocado on that. It makes the dish delicious. Same with having a veggie sandwich. So do you love veggie sandwiches?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Don't have them too often. My kids aren't a huge fan of them, so we always have to adopt our meals for that. But yeah, I love them.
So yeah, so you have 2 pieces of bread. You smear hummus on it. You put roasted red peppers or tomatoes, spinach, sprouts, cucumbers. What I miss? Onions, whatever you love, right? And some avocado on that makes it absolutely outstanding. But we're not saying put a whole avocado or even a half. It's like, a few slices. So you use it when it's going to make the dish delicious. That's the point with that. And it's the same with the nuts. So actually walnuts are a good source of those omega-3 fatty acids. You really need to get at least the recommended, daily requirement of those. So that is usually a 1/4 cup of walnuts or a tablespoon of flax meal. So that's really how I'll start my clients off in that way, so that they don't have pistachio nuts and almonds and bags sitting around in the drawers for them to eat. So, because that's a sure way not to lose weight.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially with the clients that you're taking on, it sounds like they definitely need to kind of overhaul things.
They do, and also a lot of times they're overeaters. So even if you say, "Oh, a quarter cup of nuts a day," they'll grab the pistachio nuts and they will just eat out of the bag and not even pay attention. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So we try to really focus on fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. And I always have to teach them about, why no oil. And, I do a lot of cooking with them and I show them how to cook without oil and all of that. There's a learning curve.
So what would you say are some of the key benefits that your clients experience when they go plant-based?
So, the first thing that happens is their digestion smooths out immediately, because most meat and cheese eaters are horribly constipated. They are not regular. They have all kinds of GERD and digestive distress and heartburn, and they can't eat this and they can't eat that, and they're sensitive to this. And this includes even people who say they're sensitive to gluten. A lot of times after a period of time on a whole food plant-based diet, they find that they can all of a sudden tolerate gluten just fine. And they can also eat those cucumbers that used to make them burp, and they don't get heartburn anymore, and they don't get rashes from tomatoes or mangoes or any of the things that used to be like very food sensitive. That happens pretty quickly. And digestion. So the daily digestion really smooths out, and people always comment on that. And the second thing that happens, even like a week later, so maybe the first few days, they may have some headaches. That's that detox coming out. That's the meat and cheese coming out of the cells, out of your arteries, the cholesterol coming out, and your body's working on sweeping that out, right? The increased fiber helps sweep that out. And people start to notice like the energy and the inflammation leaving their body. And in the beginning, I used to say, "How do you know you don't have inflammation? What do you mean?" And they would say, "Well, I can squeeze my fists and my feet don't hurt when they hit the floor," so that happens quickly. And then, they start to lose weight. In the first week, they lose weight very rapidly. And that's because they're very overweight, most of them. So they will, lose 10 pounds quickly, and that energizes them, and then they take their blood pressure and they realize that their blood pressure lowers. And then 3 months later, they go to the doctor, and most often their cholesterol will be reduced. And at the same time, their A1C will be down, and they'll be taking less insulin. The one thing that happens very quickly for type 2 diabetics on insulin is that their daily injectable insulin needs decrease markedly. So they'll be able to maintain the same A1C, but without the insulin that they were taking, which is huge and only gets better from there. So that's some of the things they can look forward to quickly.
Yeah, I mean, those are all things that I think are well documented too, in terms of the benefits of a plant-based diet. And
well documented,
sometimes
evidence-based.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it just takes a little personal experience, like to, if you're on the fence, for example, if you're somebody who could really benefit from going plant-based, but you're not totally convinced. I think sometimes hearing stories like this can help,
Yeah. So,
push in that direction.
So I run a free Facebook group called Going Vegan for Health. And in that group, everybody who joins it is somebody who's interested in going vegan for their health. But what I do with my clients is I document their health turnarounds. And even they will provide me with photos if they're, somewhere else where it's not local. But if they're local, I'll meet up with them and we'll take like these photos of them holding the amount of fruit and weight that they lost in the 10-week program that I have. I have a 10-week whole food plant-based, no oil weight loss group program. So those fruit pictures are really great. And then it will have a quote saying what they experienced. I got off my blood pressure meds. I lost 27 pounds. I did this, I did that. And then even I'll follow up with them a year later to get them all the way to their goal weights. These transformations that the people say in their own words are really what is most powerful. And Another place you can see those is on the success stories on the Forks Over Knives website. There are countless, hundreds of success stories of people writing in to tell their Forks Over Knives success story. And I always recommend people read those. And, I have a whole blog post with like a slideshow of, those stories. And then also I have like, local events where I do movie screenings and, cooking workshops and things like that. I work with a local, lifestyle medicine physician that's in my town, and we do these movie screenings, and I always invite clients and people that I know and that I've helped adopt a whole food plant-based diet and have this kind of health turnaround, and they will stand up and tell their story. And when they tell their story live in front of people who are struggling with the same issue, it's so powerful.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'll just for the listeners, I'll be providing some of these links to the Going Vegan for Health website, as well as the Facebook group. So that way you can get in touch with Naomi on the show notes page as well.
Yeah.
And so Naomi, I know we've talked a lot about the diet that you're recommending, the benefits of it. And we've kind of sprinkled in some advice along the way. But if you still haven't convinced somebody that going plant-based is good for their health, what would you tell them? What would be the biggest piece of advice that you can give?
The biggest piece of advice that I could give is one that I learned from you about a half an hour ago, which is just give it a try. You could do anything for a couple of weeks or even for a month, and just give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, so just for the people, we weren't recording at that point, but I was telling my transition, and which is episode 2 of the podcast as well, if you want to learn more about that. But it's, just something that my wife and I were like, I don't know if this is something we're going to stick with long term. We didn't have any drastic health that we need, issues that we needed to overcome, but we're like, let's see how we feel after 30 days. And I mean, before the 30 days was even up, my mind was convinced, just as you mentioned, like the very first thing I noticed was digestion. And that was only like
wonderful.
That was the only thing I kind of had an issue with. And I didn't realize how much better the digestion could get.
People get used to their misery. They just get used to it. And they're like, oh, well, I guess this is the way it is. That's not the way it is. It's not the way it's meant to be. And once you feel it, then you realize how much better things are. Like, I would say that I have never been thinner, stronger, smarter, prettier. I think even my hair is less gray. Like, I'm reverse aging. That's what it feels like.
Which is great. It's good to feel that way, right? I mean, that's the way that we should feel. And hopefully as we continue to get, older, it's not, what we like. That's one of the goals of myself, right? Like, I want to live a long, happy life, just like most people. But when I do get older, I still want to be, able to do things. Like I've seen
exactly
people in my family, as they get older, that just, it's a lot more difficult to be active. But that's, not what I want for myself.
Exactly. The other piece of advice that I always give people is to not just watch one of these documentaries, but watch 5 of them. Like, number one, you're going to learn the evidence base for this way of eating. Number 2, you're going to hear it from a lot of different, really high caliber experts. You're going to come to recognize them. You're going to learn how this can specifically benefit you. And then you're also going to learn how this way of eating benefits more than just you and your health. So, I very often, like, I'll have coaching calls with people and they will have not seen the documentaries. And so I basically don't even work with anybody until they have watched all 5 of them. You know what I mean? So, and the 5 that I recommend is different for everybody, depending on, what type of illnesses they're following and what type of illnesses that they are experiencing, and also depending on where their interests lie. So if they're a real animal lover, I'll suggest something different. If they have environmental instincts, I'll suggest something different. If they are just focused on their health, I'll suggest all the different documentaries that address different aspects of health. If they have a lot of children, I'll suggest a different one. So I suggest watching those documentaries. They are very powerful. And, often one, you could be like, oh, well, that's one. After you've watched 5 of them and you've watched 30 different experts tell you the same thing, you're like, okay, now I see,
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one day, like early on, after I decided to go plant-based, I had gotten sick, and I was like homesick and nothing to watch on the TV kind of thing. And I like binge watched some of these documentaries.
That's what I did too.
And when you watch one after another, you're like,
oh shit, right?
You can't argue against it anymore.
You cannot.
It's the evidence is very clear.
You're so right. And of course, I'm suggesting the ones that are evidence based. I don't suggest anything where somebody says, well, I think, or only I did this. Well, there's one that I suggest that's like that, but usually they're not. But, the evidence base is important to me because that's what's backing this whole thing. And there is so much evidence, 50 years worth of evidence.
All right. So just a couple of more questions for you, Naomi.
Sure.
So when people switch to this type of diet, I mean, doing things in the kitchen may be a little bit different. You may end up, for a lot of these people, cooking at home a lot more. Do you have any like appliances in the kitchen that you recommend for people who?
Oh, heck yes.
That just don't have really a kitchen set up to live this way.
Yeah. So I totally recommend an Instant Pot beyond all recommendations. I think it is the number one most wonderful thing ever. I mean, it really revolutionizes your time in the kitchen, and it allows for the type of batch cooking that you can do so that you're not wasting time constantly cooking meals from scratch every single day and then having nothing to eat the next day. When you use the Instant Pot to make beautiful soups, stews, sauces, batches of rice, batches of quinoa, like double batches of things, then you always have something ready to eat for days when you're busy or you're sick or you don't have the ingredients. And then you can just go rooting around in the freezer and be like, oh, let's have this amazing lentil soup I made last week. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I love my Instant Pot too.
Love it.
And, that's something that, it's amazing. So I've already talked about it on the show before. It's on my resources section of my website, the Instant Pot that I use, because there's a couple different sizes and stuff, but
yes, there's a couple of different sizes. I recommend the 6-quart one just for regular people that do not have a big family. If it's just you and your husband or whatever, if you have a bigger family, I recommend the 8-quart one. I use the big one for my workshops where I have to feed 25 people the soup or whatever. But that really changed my cooking in a giant way. And it's so easy to do oil-free. You just never have to add oil to anything. You just throw it all in the pot, push the button, and walk away, basically.
Absolutely.
Skip the whole saute step. Who needs it? Not me.
All right, Naomi, this has been a lot of fun. I want to give our listeners a little bit more instruction on how they can get in touch with you, though. Do you offer any way for them to chat with you? Is there like a free consultation of any sort?
Yes. The best way is to find me on Facebook at Naomi Green. You can, friend me personally. You can also find the Going Vegan for Health Facebook page. And from there is a link to request to join the Going Vegan for Health Facebook group. And from any of those things, you can simply just message me using Facebook Messenger, and you can ask me for a free 30-minute health turnaround plant power coaching call. And this way I'll get on the phone with you and I will find out where you are at, what your weight loss and health issues are. I may ask you nosy health questions. I'll ask you if I can ask you nosy health questions. And I will try to figure out where you are stuck or what your next step needs to be. And I will try to help you take that next step. And usually the next step has nothing to do with coaching with me or working with me. It's a no obligation call. Usually the next steps are pretty preliminary. And once you take those next steps on your own, you can very often adopt this way of eating on your own. So my coaching services and my programs and all the rest of the weight loss groups and things, those are for people who have just tried on their own. They just can't get it right. They don't know what they're doing wrong, or they are really desperate to overcome it and they do not want to make any mistakes. They just want it to happen fast. In those situations, having a coach guide you through it is priceless. So, for people who are not on Facebook, you can email me, Naomi at goingveganforhealth.com, and you can just ask me for that health turnaround plant power coaching call. So that's easy, I think.
Excellent. Naomi, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. I hope that anything that I said could give somebody hope that they can turn their health around and take back their life, because they can.
Hey friends, thank you very much for joining us on episode 6 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our show and check out our show notes over at plantbaseddietbenefits.com/6 for the show notes of this episode, as well as some of the products that Naomi recommended. And links to various websites and things of that nature. It's been a pleasure having you guys listen in. If you're interested, feel free to join our Facebook community as well at plantbaseddietbenefits.com/community. We look forward to having you join our community so that I can personally help you go plant-based and improve your health on your journey as well. Thank you very much for listening in today, guys. Look forward to chatting with you more on episode 7. Take care.